Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and today I wanted to do another tier list, this time going over all the legendary weapons released with Lightfall and Season of Defiance. There are a few missing on this tier list, so I will talk about those at the end, including the fusion rifles and the raid weapons. But jumping into it, I wanted to talk about the weapons that are on here first, starting with the Perpetualis. And this one is interesting because I really liked this when it first dropped, mostly because it was the only strand weapon that I had at the time. And over the course of a few weeks, it just kind of lost its luster and has been overshadowed, like by the Rufus's Fury AR from the raid, for example, which the Rufus's Fury is an A tier weapon now, but I believe will be S tier with the new auto rifle buff in PvE. It's already very good in PvP as well, so keep an eye out for that one. Rufus's Fury is going to be excellent, but Perpetualis, unfortunately, I think is going to fall into the C tier. It is fine. It does the job. If you need a strand weapon, I would argue you want the SMG instead. But yeah, overall, not too crazy, not too bad, but okay overall. Next up, we have the Kornok 22. This is another one that I'm going to put here. It is a solar weapon, so it's overshadowed by the Amit in all aspects, in my opinion. Amit is craftable, it has incandescent, it slaps. Absolutely fantastic weapon. So this one just doesn't do enough to overshadow it. It's a world drop, so getting the right roll is already hard enough. And yeah, that's just where I feel on that. So then we have the Raconteur. This is the bow. I actually like bows with headstone a lot, especially the stasis ones. So I think this is pretty solid. I don't think it's fantastic though, and I hope that eventually bows are a little bit more viable overall. Like, I know they're usable in PvP, but mostly the Monarch. And same thing with PvE. It's the exotic bows that are really standing out at times, and the other bows just don't always feel like they're doing enough to justify that slot. So, but Headstone is a very good perk that does work out really well with certain builds. Round Robin is interesting. Once we see hand cannon buffs in PvE, I think this is going to jump up. I think this is also B tier. I think it can be very, very good in PvP, but it's just not super consistent overall right now. And I think we're going to see a time where it's going to come back and be excellent. It can be very nice with strand builds, but overall, I think it belongs in the B tier. Same thing with Trust. It's actually a C tier right now. I actually loved the Trust for a long time, but 180s are in a point right now where I just don't think they stand out really well. They, again, are not bad, but I don't think it's all that great. It's got some new perks available, but I still don't think that it does enough. This is an interesting one, the Philo Tactics Spiral. Now, this is one that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. I don't think it's great though, so I think that's also going to be the B tier, and that's just a personal preference. I know some people say it's not good. I've seen some takes like that, but for me personally, it's kind of mid. And yeah, so far we've not really gotten to a lot of the better weapons. And again, a lot of that comes down to the better weapons being in the raid, to be honest. But there's some other good options that we'll see here shortly. So Jorm's Claw, this is going to be a hot take, I think, but I think this is a D tier weapon. I just don't see, based off, we have the BXR Battler, we have some other options. I just don't see any way in which this one is viable. It's not fun. It's not all that great. So that's where it's going to fall for me personally. Now we're getting to more interesting territory. I'd actually put both of these up in A tier, and I'll tell you why. Autumn Wind stands out. You're going to get a ton of drops for it, but it really stands out in PvP in my opinion. It's very good right now, and I would highly recommend checking out. Whereas Battle Scars is actually very good in PvE. Kinetic Tremors is a fantastic perk, and it lends itself to allowing for some really cool options. And that's why these two, which roll with Kinetic Tremors, I think are fantastic weapons, not only for general play, but also for endgame. Hung Jury, I think, is very good all around. You can use it in PvP, PvE, endgame, standard activities. I know not everyone's gonna agree with me, but I think it's one of the best weapons in the game. I'm glad to see it back around, and I think if there's one weapon you're gonna farm the season for Nightfalls, Hung Jury should be it, and Battle Scars is just right there as well. I just think Scout Rifles are a little bit better in PvE overall, but you're gonna get a lot of Battle Scars probably. So if you get Kinetic Tremors rolls, especially with something like Shoot to Loot, can be very very good. Now we got Nameless Midnight. This is a very average weapon. I actually think this is down here, to be honest. I'll put it in C, but it just doesn't do a lot compared to the other options we have on the table right now, and that's why I don't really care for it overall. I wish it was better, but for me, it's just not it. So then we have the Buzzard. This one actually is A tier. I like Sidearms, sorry, quite a bit more than most people. I think it's one of those situations where if you like sidearms, you're gonna love this weapon. If you don't like sidearms, you probably won't. But again, this is the versatility of this weapon because I think it is usable in PvE and PvP. PvE not really as much probably for the end game stuff if you have to try to stay alive a little bit more. But I think it's usable in a lot of different places and a lot of fun. Same thing with this. This is the Sununa. This is a actually a stasis sidearm, and I think this is a B tier. It's fine. It does the job. It has some good rolls, so you can do cool things with it. But overall, it's not the easiest to obtain. You don't get it to drop a lot, so that's why it kind of falls down a little bit, as well as the strength of it. It's nowhere that it shines, right? When I bump a weapon up, I want a weapon to either do well overall in every part of the game or have one place where it's very very good like Autumn Wind. That's where it's like so good in PvP that I think that's why it bumps up quite a bit. And I just with the sidearm, I just don't feel like it stands out anywhere, and that's why it falls where it does. So overall, let's see what's up next. We have the Synchronic Roulette. This is interesting because I don't think it's that much better than the AR, but it places higher because it's enough, and it works well with the strand builds that I'm gonna bump it up. Quicksilver Storm honestly is so good. Rufus's Fury is so good that it overshadows these two in particular, and neither one of them stands out. Like this one, Synchronic Roulette has the same problem with the Immortal that the Perpetualis has with Rufus's Fury. The Immortal's just so good right now. It's fantastic in PvP, but even after it gets nerfed in PvP, it's still going to be very good in PvE as well. It's just a phenomenal weapon, and I think a lot of people should use it. So yeah, it just completely overshadows this, and they're both the first strand SMGs. So because this one is so much better, this kind of gets left behind. Although if you can only get this one, it's still solid, and it'll get the job done. The title we haven't got the hands on yet and seen the new perks, so that's going to be hard to judge. But I think if anything, this is probably going to fall in the A, B tier, I would imagine. I'll throw in an A for now because before there have been times when it's been very good. But overall, there's a chance that it could not be all that great. However, keep in mind, it is Void. Void is very good this season. And if it gets something like Repulsor Brace on it, this could actually bump up to S tier in my personal opinion. Now we start to get into the special weapons, and we have the grenade launcher. This one, Prodigal Return, is solid. I think it's pretty good overall. It could be better, but personally, I think it's going to go in B tier. I know some people are really going to like this weapon, and some people are not going to like it at all. But for me personally, because I prefer the Waveframe grenade launchers in the game right now, and that's why it's going to fall down the list just a little bit. So next up, we have the other grenade launcher from the season, which is the Harsh Language. Again, this one is Void, so it's a little bit better, but there's just and it's Waveframe, so it can be very good. So that's why this one's gonna go up into A tier. If it wasn't just this season of the Void weapons being as good as they are, I might drop it up to S tier. But for me, it's going to go into A tier. It's hard to get the perfect roll on this, so that's the only reason I'll drop it down a little bit. Plus, I think there are other Waveframes that are better, but this one is still very good and will be good if you get a god tier roll on this one. I would definitely stick with it and try it out because I think it's just phenomenal. So then we have the Ecliptic Distaff. This one is interesting because I wish it was better, but it's just not that great. So it's gonna be sorry about that. Let's scroll back up. The Distaff is fine overall. It does the job. If you don't have another void glaive and you want to use it, I think glaives are good, but ultimately not that good and not something that I would recommend unless you don't have a better alternative. So that's where the B tier is, right? B tier, there's always going to be better weapons, but it just depends on if you can get something to fill that role instead. So now we have the Bite of the Fox, and this one is going to be B tier. I think I've seen it used quite a bit in PvP, but it's fine. It's one of those things that we know that a sniper rifle buff is incoming. So because of that, once that hits, things could change for sure. But as of right now, there's not all that great. That's why the I think this is Irukanji is called, and then the Volta bracket I think are both here. Neither one of them is bad necessarily, and I think if these become viable in PvE, then now we're talking. These are gonna jump up the list because having a good stasis sniper, having a good strand sniper could work out very well with builds. But right now, snipers just don't do well in PvE activities, and so for that reason, they fall down the list just a little bit for me personally. Now we're going to get into the Astral Horizon. This one will be fascinating once we get the Adept version to drop. I think this is still a solid shotgun overall, but shotguns are in a place now where there's a lot of options, and I don't think this is going to be any better than a lot of them. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about the shotgun so far this season, so I wouldn't be surprised. We don't have the Adept version, but if the shotgun was that broken, if it was that good, then it would already be shining. And so that's just a personal preference. Now we're going to get to an interesting spot because we have the Basso Ostinato, which I think is fine, right? I think this is solid. I think I'm going to put it in C. I'm not the biggest fan of slugs. Well, this is a rapid fire frame. So I'm not the biggest fan of the rapid fire frames is what I meant, but it almost gets overshadowed by the slug option of Nessa's Oblation. That's from the raid. That one is interesting because the slugs, you can do some interesting things in PvE, especially with something like the Oblation that has Reconstruction on it, whereas the Basso Ostinato just doesn't shine anywhere at this point. It can be a lot of fun with destabilizing rounds, but I just don't think it's good enough to really stand out. Same thing goes for the hand in hand. This one I'm actually going to drop down here. I haven't seen a single person use hand in hand at all this season, and from my what I've used it for, it's not good. It's just not my favorite. This is gonna be a hot take. I missed this one earlier, but the Hero's Burden I think is also C tier. I think there's just better options, right? Destabilizing rounds is something that people kind of hyped up, but I think you'd rather have one with Repulsor Brace. I think you'd rather have other SMGs that are just better overall. So for that reason, like Unforgiven, like there's just other options. So that's why it's C tier for me. Now we're gonna get into the heavy grenade launchers, which is very fascinating for me because there's one of them especially that I absolutely loved the idea of, but it just has not been good, and that is going to be the Dimensional Hypertrochoid. Sorry, I gotta look up some of these the names because they're wild. This one I was so excited for it. Stasis, all heavy waveframe. I thought it was gonna be excellent, and it's just floundered. It's not been great at all. Same thing with the Marcelian. We got a buff to grenade launchers, and this one just doesn't hit right. The Regnant, on the other hand, I think is solid, right? I think this is one. There was a glitch early in the season where you could pull this from collections, but it's pretty good. just not going to outshine some of the other DPS weapons that we have in the game right now. So that's why it drops down just a little bit. Then we've got the circular logic. This one I actually like quite a bit. This again, most of the weapons are going to fall on this B tier. Um, and it's a good weapon. It's a good weapon. I think machine guns are in a good place. I think for strain builds it can be very, very nice. There's some things it does well. It doesn't. It's not a must have, so that's why I don't put it any higher. Whereas the swarm, this is gonna sound crazy. I'm gonna put the swarm up there. You get an adept swarm with a arc weapon, and it's just an absolute blast. I think this is gonna be tremendous with some updated perks and stuff, and so that's why I'm gonna put it a bit higher. Caretaker, I'm gonna put a B. This one I'm gonna make a video on with the full build, but the reason I like this, having this with incandescent, is better than chain reaction in my personal opinion on swords. So that's why that's going to be up a little bit higher than most people might assume. I actually like this quite a bit. And yeah, so now finally we have the Nas Redden. This one is fine. It's whatever. It's probably going to be C tier. Overall, those are all the weapons that I have right now on the list. But let's jump into the other weapons that are available. Rufus's Fury. That's going to be S tier in my personal opinion. It is good in PvP right now. It's going to be really good in PvE as well. It's already really, really solid, so keep that in mind and definitely chase that bad boy. Michael's Reverence, that's the sidearm. That's going to be in the B tier. It's another one that's fine. It does the job, but I wouldn't necessarily go chasing one unless you absolutely need it. Then we've got the fusion rifles. This is where it gets interesting. Royal Executioner right now is okay, but I think it's going to be A tier once the buff hits to fusions in PvP, and I actually like it a lot in PvE as well. Whereas you have Iterative Loop, I think that's a B tier weapon. I just like the Royal Executioner better with the way it plays. That's just a personal preference, but that's how I feel. So then we've got Nessus Ablation. I talked about that already. That one has potential. It's also going to fall in the B tier. Let's see what else we got. Acacia's Dejection. That is the trace rifle, the A tier. Okay, that's going to be an A tier weapon. I think it's very good. Having that with some of the perks it can get, like Reconstruction, is absolutely insane. I love it so much, and I would highly recommend chasing that if you like trace rifles even a little bit. Trace rifles are pretty good right now. Briar's Contempt, the linear fusion, they got nerfed recently. This actually falls in the C tier. It's probably the worst of the raid weapons in my personal opinion, just because of that nerf. And then we also have the other swords that weren't on here, the Gold Tusk, Death Razor, and Throne Cleaver. Those are all fine. I don't think any of them really stand out any more than the others, in my personal opinion. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on those. I haven't really tested all of them because I've only really gotten the one for the Titan pretty much, like as I've been chasing rolls and stuff like that. So that's just kind of where I fall on that. And then so one other thing I wanted to mention, the Arvandale, I think I pronounced that wrong. It's a stasis fusion rifle that has Reconstruction on it. Keep that on the back of your mind. That's a new perk that drops on that weapon now. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. Anyway, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this tier list. I've got everything where I think it deserves to be, in my personal opinion. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more tier lists and other content like this from me in the future. My name is JoPa. I hope you have a good one. Catch you all later.